Welcome to day 4 of Streaming Media East Connect 2021. It's our biggest virtual conference yet, and it's our 4th. It won't be our last. We're going to have another Streaming Media Connect in August, but we're planning on our next in-person event happening in Huntington Beach in November. Streaming Media West is in the works, and if you're interested in speaking at Streaming Media West or perhaps sponsoring Streaming Media West, you can get more information at the link that Steve Nathans-Kelly has just posted in the chat. The chat will be open during this Zoom panel, but we ask that if you have any questions for our panelists that you put them in the Q&A tab. That makes it easier for us to keep track of them, and we will gather them up and ask them of the panel at the end of the session. As always, all of our sessions will be available in the archives on Streaming Media's YouTube channel. And again, Steve will put a link to that in the chat, but you can also go to streamingmedia.com and click on the videos tab at the top and pull down to conference videos, and that will take you to all of our Streaming Media East Connect videos, as well as videos from past conferences. So before we jump in, I would like to thank our diamond sponsor, Signient, for helping to make all of Streaming Media East Connect possible. And we've got a short video message from them now.
When the director calls action.
And action.
When the game is on.
Pick it up, it's good.
Or it's time to save the universe again. Media Shuttle is there. Trusted by more than 25,000 media companies, Media Shuttle delivers, making it easy and secure to send any size file anywhere fast. The journey begins with Media Shuttle portals, customized and branded for any project and designed to be so easy, your end users will love it. All while giving operations teams complete control through a simple yet powerful admin interface. Add users, set permissions, customize file delivery specs, and report on all activity. Blast off with proprietary acceleration technology. Media Shuttle moves your content anywhere in the internet-connected world at hyper speeds. Along the way, your files are protected. Our commitment to enterprise-grade security has made Media Shuttle a preferred tool with Hollywood studios, major sports leagues, broadcasters, and more. With Media Shuttle, your files are never handed over to Signient. File movement is orchestrated between the end user's workstation and your storage, whether on-prem or in the cloud. Your IT team simply provisions your storage, connecting it to the Media Shuttle cloud service, and Signient handles the rest. Get started on your Media Shuttle journey today, a journey without limits.
I'd also like to thank the sponsor of this session, Elecard, and Elecard's Andrey Pozdnyakov will be joining us for this panel discussion about emerging codecs, specifically LCEVC, EVC, and VVC. And we've got a great group of people here to talk about that, including Streaming Media Zone and Streaming Media Learning Centers. Jan Ozer. Jan, welcome.
Thanks, Eric.
Take it away.
Oh, thank you. So I'm Jan Ozer. Thank you all for coming. As you know, over the last 3 or 4 years, the codec world has become incrementally more complicated. And just thinking back this morning, in 2005, we cared about VP6. In 2009, we cared about H.264. In 2013, we cared about H.264 and maybe VP8, but we started hearing about HEVC and VP9. In 2015, there was H.264, VP9, and HEVC. In 2019, AV1 came into the picture. And then in 2021, we've got H.264, VP9, HEVC, AV1, VVC, LCEVC, and maybe even EVC by some accounts. So there's a lot to think about when it comes to deploying codecs over the next few years. And here to help us make sense of these choices are 3 outstanding panelists. Tarek Amara is a principal video specialist from Twitch. According to one source, Twitch boasts 3.9 million monthly unique streamers and 1.74 million average concurrent streamers. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, live streaming platforms in the world. Now, most streaming companies are vaguely interested in codec efficiency. Twitch lives and breathes codec efficiency. And in his role as principal video specialist, Tarek has tested almost every codec known to man in many flavors of those codecs. And he's here to share this knowledge and will speak first reviewing the current crop of codecs in terms of quality, cost, playback availability, and other features. Alex Davies is an editor and senior analyst at Rethink Technology Research, and he spent the last 6 months of his life talking to codec developers, phone and TV vendors, OTT producers, and other experts to produce the media and entertainment transcoding workload and device royalty forecasts from 2020 to 2030. And it's the first and only report I'm aware of that attempts to put numbers to codec projections for both codec usage and codec royalties. And that's through 2030. Alex will share many of his high-level projections with us today, and he'll speak second. Our third speaker is Alex Pozdnyakov, sorry about that. And he's the president and founder of Elecard Group and our sponsor. Should have gotten his name right. Elecard makes tools that codec developers use to analyze their performance, compatibility, and compliance with the specs. Without tools like Elecard Stream Studio, which I use here at Streaming Learning Center, which now supports the VVC, codec implementers would have a tough time making their encoders and decoders work reliably. Andrey will discuss the comparative complexity and efficiency of codecs, including AVC, HEVC, VVC, and AV1, and how tools like artificial intelligence may help solve the problem of complexity. So we're going to talking about a whole new topic where codecs are going in the future. And I think the AI portion, nobody's talking about it, but I think that's very, very significant. And I'm really interested to hear what Andrey is going to say about that. He'll also tell us about how visual tools like StreamEye help accelerate codec development. So let me hand it off to Tarek at this point, and take it away, Tarek.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the very generous introduction. Let me start sharing my screen. Quick check. I hope you can see my slides. Jan, thumbs up.
Looks good. Looks good, Tarek.
Perfect. Okay. Good morning and thanks everyone. Tarek. Yeah, I have a different title now. I'm the engineering manager of video transcoding to Amazon. Before we get into the conversation, I would like to briefly go through some numbers, and this is really to put the issue or the topic we're discussing today in context. Compression is important for Twitch because today we are streaming more than, we are having more than 230,000 concurrent channels. These are all channels that needs to go from ingestion, transcoding to delivery, and 234,000 concurrent channels is a really big number that requires lots of effort, and compression is at the core of that. And that is a growth of about 100,000 from 2019. Compression is important also because we have reached this year in January more than 6.6 million concurrent viewers. These are just people sitting at the same point of time watching streams coming from Twitch. Compression is also important because we have reached in 2020 more than 1.1 trillion minutes watched, and that is almost double of 2019. Just to put that in scale, really, it's if you take the whole New York State, not city, which is about 20 million people, they will all sit watching video nonstop for 38 plus days. So that amount of data is really huge. The second slide I want to briefly share before we dive into the codec part is that same technology, that same expertise and infrastructure now is made available on Amazon Web Services as a new video service. It's called Amazon Interactive Video Services, or IVS, that basically manages everything for people to go to get their own streams live to viewers. It's a solution, it's a turnkey solution that is really cost-effective, scalable, reliable. I would say, as you mentioned as well, Jan, is one of the biggest state-of-the-art live streaming platform. It offers everything from ingestion, playback SDK is offered as well. It offers VOD archiving, interactivity, and more to come. I would definitely recommend for people to go and have a look at AWS, Amazon, and search for IVS. I really had these two slides in preparation to say, you know, we do lots of video kind of streaming, video transcoding, video encoding, video archiving. So compression is really at the core and the heart of what we do. I want to do a quick kind of intro for people. Maybe, I don't know how much people know, but I think you went already through this list, Jen, but these are the main codecs we have today. I'm not necessarily going to dive into every single information on this table, but H.264 is the 2003 standards and it's pretty much universally supported today. 2013 is when we have seen the big two kind of encoders in the market today, HEVC, which is a VKEG MPEG codec, and VP9, which is a Google initiative. Then we have seen in 2018 or 2019 the AOM, which is the Alliance of Open Media. The main video interested companies, I would say, have been gathered to build this new video video encoder, but more than just the encoder, to be honest. And then recently we have seen the 3 new babies from MPEG or VKG MPEG, so the VVC, the LCEVC, and the EVC. The interesting part about this is they all try to solve a big problem, which is further compression efficiency, enabling new services and enabling like HDR and 8K. They have different approaches for the royalty part, which is an important one in that conversation anyway. But from a technology point of view, all these are really working hard to achieve further compression savings and deliver state-of-the-art video encoding tools. I have a few slides about each of one of those. Not necessarily gonna eliminate you guys about what these can deliver. They all deliver some compression gains, but just the main points that I feel are differentiation between these encoders. The VVC is mainly the legitimate successor of H.265, right? H.266 is a VKG MPEG standard. It's one of the main highlights I'd like to bring to the audience here is like one of the main features discussed at the early days of the standardization is that the tools needs to be turned on and off. And that is very clear message like saying we will allow people using these codecs to turn on and off features. Again, that's kind of a licensing protection. It has got a huge contribution base, which is really good from a technology point of view. What I have to the right here is the list of contributors and the ratio of their contribution from, I think, the patented ratio. This is a big group. It's very comparable to the EVC group. That's in one side really positive because, you know, all these big companies with all the expertise, they kind of definitely bring a good encoder, but on the other side as well, the licensing challenge might not be very different from an EVC challenge we have seen over the last years. Compression efficiency very quickly. Again, I would like really to throw this before I share the numbers is, you know, different evaluation could lead to different results. People can focus on Ultra HD or 4K is where the new codecs have better efficiency, different content, whether using the training sets or the CTC, the JVAT clips or some separate clips, all those could lead to different results. But I think in general, we could comfortably say, yes, VVC gives roughly 35% compression gain. This is without diving into whether it is live or VOD, with an additional complexity, which is almost a natural result of adding tools and adding complexity to the compression. It adds a complexity of about 10 times for encoding and 25 times for decoding compared to the EVC test model. The second codecs that came in, it's only an MPEG standard actually. It's the Essential Video Coding, EVC. It's mainly Samsung, Huawei, Qualcomm, and Davies contributors. This was they in the early conversation of MPEG, this was meant to address the licensing issues of EVC. Something that is low complexity as well would be good. So at the end, we have 2 profiles. One is the baseline profile, supposed to be free, and I think it's going to be free, with only using tools that are either 20 years old, which means they're already free, or type 1 tools, which contributors are not planning on asking for licensing fees for those. Also, there is a main profile, which the goal is to stick to only tools that give substantial gains with minimum possible complexity. And also there is an agreement, although there is no enforceability there, to have licensing shared or made public within a couple of years. This is definitely a very interesting codec because with if you look at my table down, the baseline profile is giving 30% compression savings compared to EVC, with a 40% reduction in complexity in the encoding side and 100% reduction on the decoder side, which I think could be interesting. The main profile, which is obviously there will be licensing terms coming to it, is giving 35% above EVC, again, with 500% reduction in encoding and 200% of reduction complexity in decoding. Again, these numbers are taken, what was compared here is the models, not like an industrial implementation, but this is a good guidance to say, yes, this encoder is giving gain and savings at the same time, which is not very common. The third one, which is the most recent announcement as well, the LCEVC. I don't know if I should really call this a codec or a competitor to the other list. This is in a fairly comfortable position because LCEVC can be built around every other encoder. It is specifying the enhancement layer, and it is backward compatible, and it can work on top of any of the existing encoders. So I feel LCEVC sits in a probably comfortable position with that respect. It's not necessarily competing with the other. One interesting benefit as well is it's at least bringing two benefits which in general encoders do not bring, which is on one side the further compression efficiency, and on the other side is computational complexity reduction as well. So LCEVC numbers, I think, Jan, you were part of some of these analysis and research benchmarking results. It's bringing in for around 30% compression savings compared to AVC when it is built on top of AVC with a 300% complexity reduction. This is really an interesting technology that I'd recommend people have a look at, but might be a good candidate for future moving forward. Depends on how the codec kind of war or conversation will move forward. AV1, I'm not going to dive into the compression savings or anything, but just going to share a couple of evaluation or benchmarking points. This data comes from the very recent Moscow State University codec comparison. What I want to highlight here is, out of all the encoders that have been evaluated, I mean, this was before VVC and the other encoders came to picture, 3 of the top encoders are AV1 encoders. So it's true that AV1 comes with a complexity, but there is effort and there is good progress to make sure the compression savings and the technology is really shining there. Now I want to move and in the next couple of minutes cover a little bit, yeah, we have a bunch of very good encoders coming out there, lots of good technology, but before we decide, compression efficiency is not the only factor, obviously. There are different things that needs to be taken into consideration before we say, oh yeah, this codec will be a winner or a major codec. And by all means, we are already in a multi-codec world anyway. So these at least are bullet points or highlights of how the industry looks to be moving forward. I have here the market share of browser use. Lots of video today is consumed on browsers. Obviously, Chrome is one of the biggest, is having more than 65% of the market share. Safari is about 20%. Firefox, Edge are kind of following with 4 and 3% here. So if we look now at the codec support of these, H.264 is pretty much on every major browser. HEVC and VP9 were kind of the two who were, I would say, competing against each other. What we end up with HEVC not supported on Chrome or Firefox, and that's really a big one of the reasons why HEVC didn't really took a market, but also because VP9 has got a really very promising result, and we have seen number one is good compression ratios, but also a good presence in web browsers. AV1 is following those steps. What I want to highlight here is, as you can see, Safari is now supporting VP9, which is fairly new information, which means at least one of the biggest, I would say, influencers of the market direction has started deploying, implementing or enabling VP9, and probably AV1 is something to follow up with. So AV1 today is supported on these major browsers as well. So Chrome, Firefox, Edge, we might see Safari at some point as well. Opera, Internet Explorer obviously is being phased out for the for Edge. There is obviously no data yet for the H.266, LCEVC, and EVC. The second data I want to share is the mobile market, obviously, which is pretty big. Lots of videos are consumed on mobile devices these days. Android devices are about 2/3 or a bit more, actually 3/4 of the market. The remaining is for iOS. If I dive a little bit into, on the right graph here, iOS is 27%. The main manufacturers of Android, or the main share of the market, sorry, and the remaining are by bigger company like Huawei, Samsung, and Xiaomi. What I have here is for the main SoC manufacturers, what are the encoders they support on their flagship SoCs recently? So the Apple Bionic, it's the A14 is the most recent generation of phone chips, and that does support VP9 hardware actually. Qualcomm do support Intel VP9, and both Apple and Qualcomm, they do not support AV1 yet on their flagship. But if you look at the rest of the market, MediaTek have supported AV1 starting last year, and that's not only actually on the flagship, which is the Dimensity 1000, 1100, 1200, but even the 900 recently, that does support AV1, and that is kind of a mid-range SoC. So that is good signal that the AV1 could make it to a wider market. High silicon SoC as well does support AV1, and Samsung Exynos 2100, which is on the S21, the Samsung Galaxy S21 that has got AV1 support. So what I'm trying to read from all this is there is a good progress of AV1 penetrating the market, and hopefully soon we'll see what is the data for the remaining, but it will take time. In this slide, I'm just going through what is the progress that have been made by AV1? AV1 is really, and this is only the public information, by the way. There is lots of work happening behind the scenes. The public information saying there is good progress in encoder design and building, especially for people who care a lot about real time, like Twitch and Amazon, and obviously other providers as well. There are multiple encoders being mentioned here. I'm not necessarily going through all these details for the sake of time, but hopefully I can make these slides available for you to go through. But there is a good progress in encoding. ASIC, I mean, in general, people take a couple of generations of encoders to build an ASIC encoder, but we are seeing good initiatives from NetInt. Also, we are aware of other vendors planning on taping out 2021, 2022 for real-time encoding. AV1 decoding, there is a good progress in software in addition to the ASIC support for better performance and efficiency. From an ecosystem point of view, WebEx does support AV1. Android obviously supporting AV1 for some time now. Intel Graphics, NVIDIA, Samsung TVs and Sony TVs will be supporting AV1. So all these signals really are telling us, yes, there is a good progress for AV1, new technology that brings compression and less uncertainty, I would say, in the industry would be something to keep an eye on. I would stop here probably for the sake of time, but I will hand it now for Alex to cover his part, and we can probably have a chat at the end of this panel. Thank you very much.
Lovely stuff. Thank you, Tarek. Okay, so my go. I am Alex Davies. I work for a company called Rethink Technology Research. We're based in Bristol in the UK, and you might know us for Faultline, which is our weekly news service. But I head up Rethink TV, which is our subscription news service, and that is where the aforementioned report came from. So Tarek, I hope, has opened your eyes, if you're new to this, to a bunch of these protocols that are in play. But hopefully now I'm going to be able to fly through a sort of presentation. So this is us, this is contact details if you want to get in touch with us. And there goes my stopwatch. So this broadly is the headline graph. What I will do for the rest of this is kind of walk you through the process that we sort of used to come up with this. Down the bottom, we have the colors. I appreciate it's a bit small, but you know, get in touch. I can send you these, I'm sure. So what you'll see, the orange line at the top, that is AVC. And in our media and entertainment transcoding workload through 2030, you see it finally starts falling off. The line below it, that is HEVC. But as Jan was saying at the beginning, the old world, there used to be like a duopoly or a dichotomy at least, and now there's a plethora of options for you to choose from. So this is the forecast. The headline is that the MPEG family, the share of transcoding workload falls from about 92% down to about 73. Annual video devices, there'll be 2.6 billion units sold a year in 2030. So that's a very big footprint to consider. And what we wanted to do was try to give an illustrative example for how much this would be worth. So we used a pretty wide total addressable market criteria definition there. And the end result is that we move from a total addressable market of about 3.87 billion today to 8.42 billion in 2030. So this is a bit of context. So what you can see on the top graph, this is time spent watching. The top line is our live television channels. So 1,200 billion minutes per day watched. You can see it's gradually trending down. The line below it is over the top content that is watched on the television. So, you know, delivered over the internet, not delivered over the proprietary cable and satellite networks of yore. You'll see that one is racing up to reach it. This axis is to 2026. So we can see that over the top viewing on large screens is picking up. The grey line underneath that one, that's smartphones. No surprise there. That one's ticking up as well. But if you look at the second graph, the bottom one, you can see how the total viewing time is growing as there are more sort of video devices out in the world. So just to sort of sum that up, there's a greater need for transcoding to support these video on demand services as well as live over the top content. And this you can download. It's that bottom link. This is a timeline representation of that graph. I'm going to walk you through each section. This was made in Coggle, which is quite a nice tool if you want to use something similar. But unfortunately, there's not really a nice way to split this up, so I've just snipped it into smaller pieces. It's actually a tidied up version of a very big diagram, and part of that was tracking historical events. So looking at how the historic protocols were adopted and seeing what lessons we could kind of draw from those. So here is the sort of the prehistory, I guess, which I'm sure many of you have lived through. I'm a bit of a spring chicken, so this was before my time. But there we are with MPEG-2 in 1995. AVC obviously emerges 1998 through 2003. That was being developed. HEVC, that was a process that started in 2004 but sort of culminated in 2013. And above that, we can see in parallel the VP codecs sort of ticking along. And then at this point, this was where AV1 emerges, so 2015 through to 2018. And then this is 2020, and this is VVC, so H.266, EVC, MPEG-5 Part 1, LCEVC, MPEG-5 Part 2, and then sort of in parallel, VC6, which is peripheral, but it's important to sort of consider. But the point here is that we've kind of diverged. There's a lot more options. And just for a bit of sort of context, AV2 is already underway, sort of unofficially kind of back channels, but make no mistake, that's ticking along. And 2020 was when we saw the first AV1 silicon. But I was asking our panelists yesterday if anyone actually got hands on this one, and the answer was no. But this is our first section of the tidied up timeline, and the way that we're ordering this is that the MPEG families are below in that red color, the AV groups are above, and then the orange lines are for LCEVC. So when we're looking at media and entertainment transcoding, and the problem here, we've tried to tidy this up and simplify it, and I'm sure there's loads of little caveats and loads of little definitions that we could probably argue, but I'm going to try and keep it fairly high level so we can just rattle through it. But the point here is that AV1 is a thing. It is out in the field. It's hard to work out how much it's being used, but it is there. Whereas in 2020 as well, AVC is still about 80% of transcoding. HEVC, depending on who you ask, is between 10 and 20. And VVC, EVC, LCEVC are being completed in theory. Moving into 2021, this is our first kind of assertion that AV1 will be mandated inside Android TV. And Rethink has a pretty core focus on the pay TV operator market, which of course has now evolved into over-the-top streaming. So a lot of our sort of previous work has had quite a narrow focus. We tend to look at things from contribution through to the sort of display on the screen. So we don't look at the devices all that much that are being watched, or similarly the production process. But Android TV is gaining momentum, and in theory, there will become a point in this timeline which you'll see that all Android TV devices must support AV1 in order to get that certification. So that will be a big kind of switch. And we know as well that AV1 adopters are experimenting with LCEVC. They also have an option for something similar in terms of an enhancement layer through SVT AV1. I'm sure other people here know a lot more about that than I do. So just in parallel, this happened yesterday, really. LCEVC has published its license terms, and I've got a table coming up, which I will talk through there. But this is broadly where we are today. So moving forward, we'll stick with the green. 2022, you'd expect to see the first Android TV AV1 native set-top. 2023, we should see AV1 is sort of common in mainstream smartphones and browsers, and that should signal the beginning of an accelerated growth curve for AV1 in 2023. And there it is in 2024. We estimate that all new Android TV devices should support AV1 from that point. So we'll deal with LCEVC in 2022. You would expect the first major video provider, so whether that's an operator, a broadcaster, or an over-the-top service, you would expect that one to have been secured. And then through to 2024, we think that the initial success of LCEVC is tied fairly closely to AV1. So in the early stages, those lines are pretty close to each other. So when we look at the sort of VVC and EVC families, 2022, we should have a finalized VVC patent pool. We should see the first silicon designs, probably ASICs and FPGAs, but they'll start trickling out. In 2023, we should have the EVC patent pool that should be finalized. And 2023 is when we expect the first flagship smartphone with VVC hardware decoder. And of course, that begins the sort of process of adoption in the rest of the field. So again, first VVC set-tops and smart TVs the next year, so 2024. 2025 AV1 hardware decoders, or decoding functions in the hardware in the devices, that should be common. AVT AV2 should likely be finalized 2026. If the patterns that we've seen in the past are sort of stuck to, that should be when we see the first AV2 silicon. 2025 for LCEVC, we're expecting 3 major video services to have deployed this, because at some point it becomes a competitive advantage to use it and to stick to it. And then 2025 is also when we would expect to see VVC and EVC sort of ticking up. And we've also got a marker here for MPEG 6. That should be when the development process starts in earnest. That one, it might not be MPEG anymore. This is a long timeline, a lot could change. And there's also some sort of pie in the sky questions of whether we need this sort of codec approach, whether we might have something fundamentally different along these timelines. But 2026, that's the earliest point you would expect AVC to dip below that 50% workload. And 2027, VVC, EVC hardware decoders are mainstream. So this is the final bit. AV2 should be common enough in 2028. 2029, all new set-tops, smart TVs should support VVC at this point. 2030, if the pattern is repeated, AV2 hardware decoders are common. HEVC is in the process of being replaced by VVC, and LCEVC has converted much of the AV ecosystem and is making inroads into MPEG. So I've rattled through that. And I'll just paste this sort of slide in again, but that's roughly the logic that is guiding this graph. That is what it looks like if you have the MPEG share charted against the sort of AO Media AV share. You can see those lines are coming closer together, but they're not going to cross anytime soon. We usually work on a 5-year timeline for forecasts, and 10 years is a bit more challenging. But because we're a sort of an annual service, we end up sort of updating these. So this is how the lay of the land looks to us at the moment. This is the video devices in terms of annual sales. You can see there's a fairly prominent dip in smartphones there. But you'll also see that regular televisions are declining. By the end of the period, nearly all televisions sold are smart TVs, which is that orange line. Set-tops, just trickling down as well. And then connected TV devices, that is the yellow line, or the gold line maybe. More of those functions should be native to the smart televisions down the line. So that's a field that sort of dips off. This is LCEVC. So I was sort of under pressure to get something in here, but we reckon it gets an attach rate of something like 32% by the end of the period. And the reason is that, well, the logic is that if one service adopts it and is able to have a competitive advantage, that should encourage the competitors to follow suit. So the idea is the initial position was that it would be binary, that it would be all or nothing. But we sort of dug a little deeper, and this is where we see it. This is the current licensing rate. So this got sort of published yesterday, and I'm still waiting on some confirmation on the caps, because there is a $3.7 million cap. So what this sort of suggests is that the market opportunity for LCEVC is bigger in AVOD than in SVOD, because SVOD caps are chewed up by the number of users, so that happens quickest. The idea here is that we are not charging LCEVC royalties for devices. We're actually targeting the video service providers, and the way that they've Vinova and LCEVC have chosen to sort of gauge the value is by the number of users. Again, there's not actually a concrete definition of a user. They say annual users, but it's not clear if that's unique users. But if you take the examples that they provided yesterday of an 80 million user SVOD service, that is a 3.7 billion cap. So that works out to 0.0463 cents per AVOD. You'll notice 0.018. So you would have about 205 million users until you capped out there. And there's lots of sort of cheap options if you're a tiny little player down the bottom, but you'll note that the per user cost is actually quite a lot higher. So their big thing is that it is a progressive sort of license. So we'll sort of move on a little bit. This is the TAM, so this is video device royalties. It's pretty big. You'll see that it shoots up immediately, but that is an unrealistic, perfect sort of scenario where every single video device sold from that point on would owe a royalty. So you can see that the second graph is our sort of more realistic SOM. There's a few caveats in that, but if you combine all the codecs together, you'll see the blue line. It's sort of that the jumps you can see when the codecs arrive en masse. But if you try and smooth this out in a more realistic SOM, you get this more gentle kind of upward curve that begins to flatten off towards the end. So if you want to get in touch, that's me. And this is my final slide. So I'm going to get ready to pass this across to Andrey. But no, we've got questions at the end, so I'm sure there'll be a few there. But no, get in touch if you want to see anything else. And yeah, that's it for me for now. All right, over to you, Andrey, when I finish sharing. Sorry. There we go.
Hello, my name is Andrey Pysnikov. I am founder and president of Elecard, and I am almost 30 years in codec development. I started with motion JPEG and MPEG-1, and my first encoder was done in 1992. And since that time, I'm working in this area and still active, not as the codec developer anymore, but at least as power user of some developers' tools. So we are talking today about AV1, EVC, VVC, that is the new upcoming standards. My favorite, of course, AV1, because I am engineer and I like open standards. But my favorite also VVC, because it provides a lot of new technology, a lot of potential for future codec developers. I'd like to talk today about comparative complexity of AVC, HEVC, and VVC. I drop EVC since I'm not specialist in it. And all that I'm talking about is based on my personal experience, on my personal experiments, and it may differ a bit from, say, common view. The very often question for me is when HEVC will start to dominate over AVC. It's evidently that HEVC is much better, much higher compression, and it looks mature enough, but it's still used just a small fraction of the market. One of the common answers is patent problems, but it's not the main problem. The main problem, from my point of view, is complexity. Look, mature enough AVC encoder, it appears something about 8 years, maybe even 10 years after standard emerged, say, and around at the same time, 2010, 2011, AVC start to dominate over MPEG-2. Today, Rethink TV push forward domination of EVC over AVC to the end of 20s. So 15 years after standard appears. And I think they are quite optimistic because this may happen even maybe in 30s. Let me illustrate the complexity, comparative complexity of those codecs with a few screenshots. So let me, okay. So this is AVC. This is the block of intra block of AVC. I will not go too much in technical things, and I will try to be as simple as possible. So this is the block of AVC. This is the way how those sub-blocks or full block could be predicted. And looks pretty simple. This is the same intra block for the same frame, for the same video, for HEVC. And it looks much more complex. So this is the way how the block could be subdivided into sub-blocks. And on the left, you see the ways how each sub-block could be predicted. It's around a few hundreds more calculations if we want to run it like just by brute force, calculate everything, all the details. In both cases, in AVC and even in HEVC, we can do this by brute force. And this is how it looks for VVC. So the number of possible predictions is tripled compared to HEVC. You see the potential number of partitioning, and here for VVC we have no enough computer power to calculate every partitioning. So in any case, we may calculate it. So we may calculate it for one block, probably. We probably may calculate it for one frame, but we will never calculate it for all frames in sequence. It means, at least in statistically interesting part of video. So, and this is the block on just on a simple HD video, 1080, 1920 by 1080. It's not 4K, it's not 8K. Okay, let me return back here. So this is complexity of AVC, HEVC, and VVC. So AVC complexity compared to VVC, it's like tic-tac-toe compared to Go game. And look also on those on the right. Each row on the right, each additional row on the right, it's not like +1. It's like multiplied by 2. So this additional feature of each small block here. Well, if you are talking about AV1, this is the AV1. It's more or less close to VVC, but of course it's not that. It's comparing, but not that hard to encode. So let us see what we got with all this complexity. This is the residual view. This means that residual is the predicted pixels minus original pixels. So this actual data, which then transformed into frequencies, then quantized, and then go to entropy encoder. This is exactly the data that we are compress. And this is what we predict in EVC. And you may see a lot of small noise here and there. And actually, this is what is compressed badly. This is for HEVC, almost clear here. And this is for VVC, almost, I might say, almost nothing. But the main question for me is how much better VVC could be. And it's evident that it could be significantly better than we see here. Say, just simple example. This is black stripes on top of my video. And this VVC encoder encoded as one block, which is apparently not correct. It must be subdivided on subblocks. Say, for example, AV1 encoder subdivide black part of image and actual video. Well, so if in AV1, if in AVC and even in HEVC, we may rely on some algorithms based on human understanding how all this stuff is working. And we may do the full calculation for all the blocks, for all subdivisions, and have to have the, say, ideal case of encoding. Then for this type of standards, we cannot rely on human understanding and must use machine learning. You know that everyone has a huge success during last couple years and became one of the most promising codecs. And actually, I am even a bit surprised why Rethink TV predicted only 10% of AV1 market share to the end of 20s. From my understanding, it may have much more. Well, it's quite obvious, and actually all the expert knows that AV1 speed up was achieved with ML, machine learning powered models and features. But the significant problem with machine learning approach is how to control it. Visual control of output picture, VMAF calculations, it does not work because we do not know the ideal case. Any objective or subjective metric gives you the knowledge. This is better than that, but it does not answer on a question. Could it be done better? There are a few visual tools which may help to make some progress in the right direction. Let's demonstrate it again with residual view of Elecard StreamI. So I encoded my favorite movie, my favorite test movie with the latest AVM AV1 encoder. By the way, overall compression at the same quality as HEVC test model 16 was almost 30% better. And for this type of video is a huge number. And this is at speed of around 1 frame per second on my notebook. It's very much impressive. So I opened the compressed file in Elecard StreamI. In residual view, this actual data which came to the compression, and I saw those 4 small artifacts on the 3rd frame in display view. There are no such artifacts on previous frame and on the next frame. And by the way, there is no such blocks on the same place encoded by VVC. So this is obvious some problems with prediction or partitioning. The weight of those 4 blocks is around 150 bits, and the weight of the same blocks on previous and the next frame is around 15 bits, which means that this encoder lost here about 140 bits, 140 bits, and we do not know how much more bits were lost on other blocks due the non-ideal prediction partition. So each of the codecs could have significant improvement maybe in upcoming 10 years. So if somebody asks you how much VVC is better than HEVC, the correct answer is nobody knows. At comparable speed, it has comparable quality. At 20 times slower speed, it has around 15 to 30% gain. At 1,000 or 10,000 times slower, VVC probably may reach 50, 60, or even 70% gain, but it is not exactly. We will know this in 10 years from now. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Those presentations were great, and that tool looks wonderful. It's a tool I've used before, and the residual view is fabulous for understanding where the differences are. There's really, it's a great view. So we've got some questions from the audience, and let me jump right into them. First one I think is pretty easy. Let me hand this one off to Alex. And Alex, give us a 1-sentence answer on this. Do you think the current development of AV2 will interfere with the wide adoption of AV1?
It shouldn't. I mean, we haven't mentioned it yet. It's sysvel and the licensing and the potential for a big old case. That's the thing that will interfere, not the AV2 development, I don't think.
Okay. Tarek, could you briefly tell us what codecs you're using today and what you think you'll be using, say, in 2 years?
Today, we are using mainly H.264 EVC, and we also use VP9 for live streams. We are looking at the industry, obviously. We cannot predict the future, but AV1 is the strongest contestant for the OTT streaming in general.
Okay. Andrey, that StreamI tool, what codecs is that compatible with? I guess you showed us.
Well, it's compatible starting MPEG 2, MPEG 4, H.264, HEVC, VVC, AV1, VP9.
Okay.
And we are also working on this Chinese standard. Okay. Too many standards.
Okay, for the audience, we're going to ask the panelists to send us their slides, and we're going to send those off to all attendees. So I think everybody's good with that. So this is for Alex again. This is what happens when you put numbers on a page. Your report seems to be optimistic that the licensing issues with VVC will be resolved pretty simply, and you're pretty optimistic about VVC. So why is that?
It's because history just tends to repeat itself. And the big question here, the sort of the long view is, will there be a showdown? Because obviously EVC, I personally like EVC. I don't use it. I've never dived into it, but in principle, the simplified patent pool is much more attractive, and especially with the sort of ongoing Huawei shenanigans and the entities list and things. So like the shift is whether anyone's fingers get burnt in VVC that pushes them then to deploy EVC. And then at the same time, whether there's the equivalent in the sort of AO media ecosystem where we once just had the MPEG LA to consider, now we have VLOS and Access Advanced. Whether we see AV1 sort of targeted by litigation to establish patents and things. You can speak to lots of vendors and come out with multiple different views of that market, but what we try to do is put a realistic sort of time frame on it, a bit of logic. But I'm sure there'll be a few changes down the line.
Okay, I'm going to ask this one to Tarek because I know you see everything a lot earlier than most people, but what are you seeing on the machine learning or artificial intelligence-based codecs? I know there's a couple out there. What are you seeing and what's your thoughts on them?
I think probably I will echo what Andrey said. They are accelerating these high complexity encoders, and they are really delivering good results as we stand right now. And I think they will probably enable deployment of these complex encoders. Same will apply for VVC, I'm sure. But the AV1 impact was really something we were definitely seeing results. Bear in mind today, what are we comparing? Just very open parenthesis, small parenthesis here. We are comparing these new codecs to what we have today in the industry, which is not the gain they claim against EVC or VP9. Let's say AV1 is claiming another 50%, right? But if we deploy it, we are deploying it against or on top of H.264. So the gain there is higher. So the business interest is higher as well. So even if with the first generation encoder that does not deliver the promise of 50%, if it delivers 10% above HEVC, that's really a good step forward. But definitely, all these new techniques are enabling the high complexity encoders to be feasible for real time, which is our biggest challenge compared to VOD as well. And we're seeing really very interesting results from multiple vendors indeed.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up. I'll forward any remaining questions to the panelists best able to answer it. And I'm going to close and hand it off to Eric.
Thank you so much. That was great. We had over 100 people watching, lots of questions. So yes, we will forward those questions to the panelists. Panelists, if you are okay sharing your slides with the people who attended, please send me a copy of those, preferably in PDF, and we will just send that out to the attendees. Thanks again to Signiant for sponsoring Streaming Media East Connect, and we will be back in a half hour with a session on audience targeting and data collection. So we'll see you then.
When the director calls action.
And action.
When the game is on.
Pick it up. That's good.
Or it's time to save the universe again. Media Shuttle is there. Trusted by more than 25,000 media companies, Media Shuttle delivers, making it easy and secure to send any size file anywhere fast. The journey begins with Media Shuttle portals, customized and branded for any project and designed to be so easy, your end users will love it. All while giving operations teams complete control through a simple yet powerful admin interface. Add users, set permissions, customize file delivery specs, and report on all activity. Blast off with proprietary acceleration technology. Media Shuttle moves your content anywhere in the internet-connected world at hyper speeds. Along the way, your files are protected. Our commitment to enterprise-grade security has made Media Shuttle a preferred tool with Hollywood studios, major sports leagues, broadcasters, and more. With Media Shuttle, your files are never handed over to Signiant. File movement is orchestrated between the end user's workstation and your storage, whether on-prem or in the cloud. Your IT team simply provisions your storage, connecting it to the Media Shuttle cloud service, and Signiant handles the rest. Get started on your Media Shuttle journey today. A journey without limits.